Good morning, dignitaries on the dais and dignitaries in the audience, and friends and fellows in the audience. Good morning to all of you. While the tone has been set from the very beginning that Guwahati is a very beautiful place, but you have already decided that it is very far. And now that you are here, please enjoy the time while you are in Guwahati. So they keep saying I am IS, but they don't say what exactly I work in. So I basically am joint secretary in a department called Department of Incubation, Innovation and Startups. So this is a very unique initiative from this state that felt that we need to be focused on how we are developing startups. And that is why very recently a new department was formed. And very few officers are there, and I am one of those officers that are currently posted in that department. And since another speaker who spoke before me, he explained that we have to think of triple helix whenever we think about startups, which is government, academia, and industry. And I will stick to only government part because industry is here to speak for themselves. They will be there when they will be speaking for. And academia has already spoken. So let's stick to the part of government. So what I will say that since we are also very nascent in the way we are approaching the entire ecosystem, but one thing that has shifted in ASSAM for sure is that once we think of startups, we think of an entrepreneurship journey, we think of a person, first generation startups. Of course, when I say startup, I mean first generation founder, first generation co-founder who have just begun their journey because they thought of some idea and they wanted to work on it. So when they begin their journey, one of the biggest challenges that we felt is that while there are a lot of government entities who have a financial outlay, who support them financially through multiple ways and means, an industry who wants to come together and support them. But the incubators, that is one important entity that does not fall in first category, that does not fall in second category, that does not fall in third category in a true sense. Neither it is industry, nor it is academia, nor is it the government, truly, if you think about it very clearly. Of course, at this point of time, if we think about incubators, most of the colleges have incubators for the name of having an incubator. They have an incubation cell. What does it do? How does it support a particular startup? What are the sine qua non that they must have? How should it be run? What are the things that if just an enthusiast, he may or may not have any other idea about how to begin a company, because let's just come down from startup to a company, because ultimately you need to first get registered and start working towards an idea. So it is more about formalization of your idea. So if I think from that perspective, then from incubator, what is expected that how is a company registered? How are the formalization of your idea happens? How do you present your idea? Who exactly will be your potential customers? Before you think of a particular idea, you should think about who will be your customer, because just for the sake of idea, there are so many ideas that you can think of, but how much time will it take? How will you propel it into a direction that it takes you somewhere? How much time are you ready to give in? How much time will it actually take? So these kind of reality checks, I would like to call them, that can only come from an institution who has a lot of bandwidth, one, an organizational structure, two, and three, a lot of experience in seeing such people, seeing such enthusiastic individuals who are just beginning their journey. Of course, all the people who are second generation or have seen so many things while they were working on. If an employee of Flipkart went on to start a company, he had an exposure of working in Flipkart when it was a startup. It was called a startup. So his thought process, his exposure was very different from anybody else. So his questions will obviously be different from somebody else who just came out of a college, let's say ASSAM Engineering College or Guwahati Engineering College, and he just wants to work on some idea. His questions will be different. So when I talk about incubators, which does not form part of any of these three helix, I will say that this is the most important pivotal point which shapes the mass, in my opinion. 1 and 2 or 3 startups, how they are running, their passion, their drive, their idea, and the sheer luck can change the path for them. But in general, when I talk about government, I think we always talk about population, we always talk about the whole idea of state or the whole idea of country. So I cannot cherry pick 1 or 2 people who are exceptional, but I should be talking about the whole ecosystem. So when I talk about the whole ecosystem, then one thing that always strikes me is how can I enable incubators? So that idea has shifted with respect to ASSAM. Of course, earlier also, I think we have supported, of course, 590 startups. We have disbursed funds. But one thing that has shifted in the way we are approaching the problem is to enable and to bring structures in incubators. Every academic institution needs to have an incubator. But what should be the structure? What are the fundamental things that they need to be able to deliver? How should it be professionally run? Because it cannot work in isolation. I genuinely believe, I as well as the department genuinely believes that there are a few things that only an academic institution can provide. One is scope for research. No amount of isolated incubation unit can have adequate funds over a period of time that they can sustain it. They can have for once, for sure. But to sustain it over a period of time, it is only academia or very big companies, but they themselves come in conflict of interest because they are doing it for themselves. They have their R&D units, but they have their own priorities and the own reason why that has been set up. Unlike an academic institute, which is more from exploring all things that they can explore. So that is why this marriage of academic institutions and incubators in true sense, like professional sense, not just an incubation cell. In true sense, if it happens, then only the startup, and again I repeat the word startup, who are first generation, who have no exposure and have very limited idea of how should they start and what should they do next, what is the next step that they should be taking, is the requirement is the things that they require can only be delivered through incubators who have the exposure, the time and the bandwidth to be able to take up those questions and sequentially solve those problems over a period of time. So 5 years, 6 years, you handhold the idea of startups, the idea of, and also it may so happen that you are able to give that reality check to the founder that maybe this idea is not something that you should be working on, maybe something else. But there needs to be somebody who can have that authority, bandwidth, time to be able to explain that, and then also not discourage at the same time, but encourage them to take up something else. So in that instance, I think that 4th helix would be incubators, which are kind of blend of all these that we are primarily working on at this point of time. Makers Bhavan Foundation is a non-government organization who has established incubation. They call it in Tinkerers Labs, but they are basically student-managed incubation centers who have certain mandate to deliver. It's not like whatever you wanted to do, you just did because you wanted it that way. Because a certain funding and a certain check comes from the body who has run similar kind of Tinkerers Lab in other parts of the academia. So that's the idea with which we are going forward, and going forward our primary focus will be to develop as many professionally run incubators as we can, based on, of course, based on the interest of the academic institutions that I'm talking about, and the interest of the students who live in and around that area, who are part of that academic institution. Because ultimately it needs to survive on its own over a period of time. That idea has been inoculated very well now, that every entity that comes into picture needs to survive on its own. It just cannot carry on thinking that somebody needs to come and help me in my own journey also. So that's the shift in focus that has happened with respect to ASSAM. I think now that I have covered one part of the helix, let me open the floor for the next part of helix to come and present their idea. Thank you so much for your time.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.